Welcome to Internet Safety, hosted by Donna Rice Hughes. Over the next hour, you'll learn practical and crucial tips on how to keep your loved ones safe in the digital world. Now, here is Donna.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's podcast of Internet Safety, and I am your host, Donna Rice Hughes. We have a wonderful program for you. You're going to be hearing from a young student. His name is Harrison Haynes, and he is going to tell us his story. Was groomed online, and we're going to hear a little bit more about this. And now he is an incredible spokesperson and advocate for internet safety. So Harrison is a student at James Madison University, and he is studying social work and plans to go on and get his master's degree in clinical social work. He's involved with an organization, a wonderful group called Wired Human, and he's also a consultant for the End OSEAC Coalition. And you're going to say, okay, what is OSEAC? Well, that is an acronym for Online Sexual Exploitation and Abuse of Children. So Harrison, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Donna. Thanks for making a space.
Yeah, oh, you betcha. I mean, you've been everywhere. You've shared your story in a lot of really interesting places. And you're only, how old are you now, Harrison?
I'm 21.
You're 21 years old.
Yeah.
So your story of grooming actually happened on a gaming platform. And I just want to give our listeners an idea of how big gaming is. According to the Internet Software Association in 2023, they said that there were 212 million gamers in the USA, and 25% are under the age of 18. So tell us your story, Harrison. When did you start gaming and what happened?
Yeah, I've been gaming for a long time. I stopped gaming in high school as I just created better boundaries, but I started at probably like age 10, 9, and I really liked the platform Xbox. That's what we had at home. We had Nintendo and Xbox, and I was experiencing a lot of turmoil as a fifth, sixth grader, transitioning into middle school. You know, you have new friends, you're adjusting to your new body. Everyone around you is changing, and they're continuing to find their people. I wasn't. I found a lot of solace in online gaming. I played a lot of Call of Duty. I played a lot of Minecraft and games I definitely shouldn't have played, like Grand Theft Auto. I met a lot of really kind people on these platforms. Other kids like me who enjoyed playing games and found a lot of peace in these spaces where they didn't have their physical identity. They didn't have what was happening at school, and they weren't defined by what was happening at home. They could just be their character.
Right.
So for me, when I stepped into this space and I finally met a friend, his name was Adam. I was 12 years old. We played games like anybody else did. He was 19 years old at the time, and we played, like I said, Minecraft and Call of Duty. And we had a really average, normal friendship for like a year before anything bad ever happened.
And you knew he was 19 years old, but he seemed safe, right? He was your friend, yet you didn't know him in the physical world. And isn't that kind of a normal thing? Kids are playing with people that they meet online, and they have a trusting relationship. They build over time, and this is what happened to you?
Yeah, absolutely. My friend Tom from the Brave Movement says it really well. And I've said this in other spaces. We were all told as kids, and I'm sure your generation was told as well, you know, there's going to be that stranger in the white van, handing out candy, come see this puppy, you know, come play this game with me. And you're told all about these dangers in person. And you feel like, oh, well, there's a physical space difference. Like I am safe on the game.
Right.
You know, a 19-year-old, like he's a kid. So I didn't really have any red flags. And at that point, you know, we had talked a few times, and I'm like, he just wants to play the game. This guy isn't a threat.
Right. Right. And for a year, nothing really happened that would have been a red
Yeah.
flag, correct?
Yeah, it was completely normal for just about a year.
Yeah. And I will just share with you, and this is something we've been talking about for, gosh, ever since online gaming came about, and that is, or really the internet, is that you cannot recognize a disguised predator.
Yeah.
You just don't know, you know, and it could be someone you even you know in the physical world, and they could be a predator, and you trust them. So tell us when things started to turn with Adam. What began to happen, and how did you feel about it?
Yeah. Just to clarify, I use this name Adam as a placeholder.
Yeah.
So we're just going to call him Adam. That's what I've used throughout all of the different interviews and through my story. But our friendship really started quite normal. And the red flags started coming up when I was getting bullied at school. I was really having a hard time making friends. I was dealing with a lot of acne, had a lot of social anxiety, just being a kid.
Hmm.
I didn't like what the other kids liked, and I remember particularly having this crush on this girl, and I thought she was really cool. I thought she was pretty. Um, and, I'd hear all these conversations of other kids, and they would talk about how they were hooking up with their girlfriends, or, they were having sex or doing all these things. And
Hmm.
I would always think, those locker room conversations, like, I don't want to do that. Like, that's not me. So
Right.
when Adam opened up about being bisexual, I was
Mm.
like, oh, this guy has so much knowledge about sexuality. Like, why am I not feeling like sexually attracted to this girl? What's wrong with me, right?
Right.
So he kind of found his way into that conversation, and he really exploited it. So he started sending me pornographic content.
Right.
He would send me stuff from the internet. And at first I was like, okay, yeah, like he wants to see the best for me. Like, he wants me to like be attracted to this girl, and like he wants us to have a good relationship. And so I, at 12, 13 years old, started consuming pornography so
Right.
I could feel attracted to women.
Right.
Um, and like I wasn't attracted to men or women, and I didn't know, and the language we had at the time was like that wasn't a thing. Like it was either or, not nothing at all.
Right.
So I was medicating with these videos, and pictures that he was
Right.
sending me from online websites like Pornhub,
Right.
and to kind of fix a broken, hollow sense of sexuality.
Right. But you were only 12 years old too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So, I mean, everything happens different, right? At
yeah,
different times. And you're still a bit on the youngest shot side. You not
yeah,
haven't quite gone through the puberty yet. So then, okay, so you're introduced to pornography, you're introduced to heterosexual pornography,
yeah,
and you got hooked on it.
yeah,
Right? So now, did you feel like at the time, I'm kind of like getting drawn into this pornography world? Maybe I've got an issue
yeah,
with that. And I'm also really kind of, you know, hooked on gaming. And
yeah,
what was the rest of your life like offline?
yeah. It was really hard. I think
Okay.
because I had very limited friends at the time, I was isolating a lot. Um, I spent a lot of time on games, and I kind of was slowly severing my relationship with my family, especially as um my friend Adam was drawing me in. He started sending me a lot of suicide related content as he started, talking to me about his anxiety,
Hmm.
and his depression. This wasn't something that I really had language for yet. So when you ask, what did the rest of my life look like? I mean, it started going downhill really fast.
Hmm.
Um, I started having a lot of issues sleeping. I would play the games really late, and I started developing a really big sense of anxiety, making new friends and going to school. I was having problems eating. I was chronically underweight. And yeah, I was just generally really dissatisfied with my life. I would wake up in the morning and play games and go to school and come home and play games and watch porn and play games. And like that was my life.
Right.
That's what you do when you're 13. And that's the social norm now for a 13-year-old boy. Um, I was I was so isolated. Like looking back on it, we can get into the rest of the story, but like I don't know how I ever made it.
Right. And did your parents, I'm assuming now, because of everything that you were doing online, that your gaming platform, your computer, and everything was in your room. Is that right?
Yeah, it kind of traded off. So it started in my room, and we eventually put it downstairs. But we had like two like living spaces. We had like the main living room, we had like, the hearth of the home, there was the fire, there was the couches and stuff. And then we had like this. kind of, the kids' room, like the gaming space. We did our
Hmm.
homework there when mom and dad would watch TV. So like we had a separate space
Okay.
um, that was allocated for me to be able to like get loud on the game and that would in my
Right.
headset and stuff. So we definitely had two separate spaces at that point when it started to kind of escalate.
So you were now, Adam and you were having private conversations,
Yeah.
not within the game, but in messaging and chat. Tell us
Hmm.
about that, because a lot of parents may not understand the typical process of grooming, which
Yeah.
typically will happen, right? Where a predator, you know, built a friendship with a vulnerable child like you were. He knew that you
Hmm.
were lonely. He knew that you were feeling bullied and that you had low self esteem and that
Yeah.
you were struggling. So he knew all this, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And then eventually you built a trusted relationship. He started telling you his story and his issues and his struggles. You felt comfortable doing the same. And then you
Yeah.
started having private offline chats where nobody else can
Hmm.
see these conversations. So, can you help parents understand how that happens, and then where did it go from there after he's got you now hooked on porn? He's got you, looking at self harm stuff. What
Yeah.
happened next?
Yeah, it really started on the Xbox app. So
Okay.
there was the messaging platform on Xbox also connected to an app that you could get on your cell phone. So I had an iPod when I was 12 and I upgraded to an iPhone when I was 13. So
Hmm.
he would message me there,
Okay.
and eventually as our friendship grew closer into the year, um, we eventually like I gave him my iCloud or my phone number. I can't recall, but we were texting on iMessage.
Okay.
So we would text and sometimes we would FaceTime or we would call instead of being in the party chat. We would, just FaceTime and play the game. Um, and, he would text me while I was at school and it made sense. He'd be like, "Oh, are you going to be on the game today?" Yeah, I'll be on the game. Nothing weird there.
Yeah.
But eventually more and more he would be like, "Oh, are you eating dinner with your family?" I'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm eating dinner with my family right now." He's like, "Well,
Mm-hmm.
you should come play the game." Or like, "Are you at that extracurricular?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm gonna be there today." Well, we should probably come and play the game. Or and it really started escalating when he craved a lot of my attention when he was struggling with his self-harm piece. He would send me the
Okay.
self-harm images or videos or threats on himself and require my attention because I was his lifeline. So for
Right.
every moment I would spend with my people, my family, and the limited friends that I did have, he would be threatening himself.
So you were concerned about him, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. You were concerned. Do you think that, and now everything that you know about grooming and online predators, do you think that this was just part of the manipulation, or was this really were his own issues and you were his lifeline? Have you been
yeah,
able to kind of discern that now and looking back?
yeah. I think it's really important to acknowledge that people are really complicated. And
Yeah.
we like to tell ourselves a narrative because
Yeah.
it goes black and white. And it's
Right.
really easy for us to say, "Oh, this is bad and this is good and this is, we have to split into two sides here." Um, I don't think I'll ever know. And I think that doesn't change the fact that I was being groomed. I do think that potentially some of that content was real. Um, I would see the cuts and bruises on the pictures that he would send me. Um, and I mean, the way that he would cry and the way that he would get angry, it felt real to me.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
whether it was or not, like that was still felt on my end. So I
Of
think
course. Yeah.
advice that I would tell parents is like, regardless of the manipulation, whether it's genuine manipulation or just a really, really bad friendship gone awry, um, there's still a huge danger.
Right, of course. And so now you start off with, I mean, you're an innocent, vulnerable guy who's struggling in the offline world, and now you're in this relationship with
Yeah,
this guy who is really toxic and sounds like he has his own issues.
yeah,
And I can tell you, and I just want to share this with our viewers as well. I interviewed a convicted child predator when he in jail, and I really liked him. I spent 3 hours with him, and I called him John Doe, like you call Adam Adam, to
yeah,
protect his privacy. But he started interacting with kids in chat rooms and on social media. He was hooked on porn, then he got drawn into child pornography himself or child sex abuse material. Then he started interacting with kids. And one of the things he shared, he said, I would just be whoever that kid wanted me to be.
Yeah.
And he said, and I really think they liked me and they trusted me and I trusted them. He was sexually abused at a young age and he was really kind of stuck in that 12 to 14-year-old bracket. So those were the age kids that he was communicating with. So he did have his own issues, and
Yeah.
at least from that predator story, I really began to see, especially with someone young. I mean, this guy Adam was 19. It's not like he was a
Yeah.
55-year-old sex
No.
offender, right? So okay. So now, when do you realize that you're being groomed, that you're
Mm.
kind of stuck in this
Yeah.
thing, and how did your parents find out?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Donna, I loved the way that you humanized the experience on the other end. Um, because when my parents found out, I think it was a really chaotic experience for everyone.
Hmm.
The escalation of the self-harm content was at an all-time high, multiple times a day, bare minimum several times a week, and the pornography content was very frequent. Um, I I just didn't know what to do. I was so overstimulated, and he was sending me so much self-harm content and so many threats, and he's very desperate.
Hmm.
Eventually, my parents kind of caught on that I was using my phone at night,
Hmm.
and so they put my phone downstairs. Um,
Well,
they
that
went
was
to
smart.
bed. I know, right? And I'm like, that was probably a good call.
Yeah.
And that's a really important part of my practice today. But they put my phone downstairs, and we shared a wall. So if I was talking too loud, they would hear me.
Hmm.
Um, they went to bed. It's like midnight. I go to get my phone. I run down. Um, I pull my phone out of the charger and I bring it upstairs, put my headphones in, because I've been hearing it ding and ring and buzz, and so I
Hmm.
run down and get it. And he's like a total wreck. He's talking about how tonight's the night, like he's gonna take his life. He wants to see my body. I had
Mm.
never exposed my body to him, and he'd never sent me like completely sexually explicit content of himself. So
Right.
this was like the climax
Right.
of of the criminality. He was really demanding. He was really angry. I was upset. I was
Mm.
done with dealing with him. I was just like, I tried so hard to like be this person for you and to like be a friend to you, but I at this point I didn't feel like we had a friendship anymore, and I felt like I was just his like honestly his accountability buddy to make sure that he didn't, he woke up the next day,
Right.
and it was
Mm.
draining. So I was so
That's a lot of
angry.
pressure,
Yeah, and
Harrison.
I'm like 13 years old, like trying to
Right.
be an adult in a kid's body, and I'm navigating all these feelings. I'm so angry, and so I just start crying and I start yelling like quietly, and my parents hear, and they come in the room, and I do the whole like pretending I'm asleep thing that always works for kids, always, you know how that goes. And mom
Did
and
it
dad
work?
know. No, no. My
Didn't
mom,
work.
it's actually really funny. I shared this with Nikki on Scrolling to Death. Like my mom, she like ran her hands through my hair and she like pulled my headphones out and was like, "Oh yeah, you're done."
Mm.
But she took my phone, and um I had no idea if he took his life that night, the whole
Mm.
night. And my
Wow.
parents went through everything. So I sat in my room the next morning, and like I had gotten ready, but I didn't get out of like I didn't, get up out of bed. I had laid back down, and my parents were calling me down like, "Hey, come downstairs." And I
Hmm.
felt like I was in trouble. Then and we had a really big conversation, and my parents were scared, they were confused. They saw the porn, they saw the self-harm, they saw the months and months of messages, and they had no idea. I mean,
Right.
literally no clue.
Right.
So they called him on my iPod or iPhone,
Oh.
and we FaceTimed. And I think the most upsetting piece of all of it was when my parents introduced themselves for the first time. He immediately knew he was in trouble. He had
Right.
done something wrong, but he ate cereal like he was just eating cereal, like nothing had happened, like nothing wrong, and
Hmm.
this was just another normal day.
Right.
Um, yeah, that was really hard for our family.
Well, now, and you told me, Harrison, when we spoke earlier, that prior to this, that
Mhm.
an SRO officer, a school
Yeah.
resource officer, had come to your home and was talking to your parents, I think, about internet safety,
Yeah.
and right, and here you
Hmm.
were in the next room talking to Adam or playing
Yeah.
games, right? Okay,
Yeah. Yeah, I
so
learned later that my mom, when we were processing this, I did a story with Good Morning America over the summer, and for me it was there was a lot of trauma surrounding the event, and I hadn't really been able to fully process it. So we kind of sat together as a family again to get the story straight, and like this is how it all happened.
right,
And I didn't even know it at the time. My mom had to tell me about it. She was like, "Yeah, around the same time we had the resource officer come over, and he gave a small lecture at our like neighborhood girls' wine night, and you were literally in the next room, and I heard you talking to like, but I thought it was your friend." Um,
uh-huh,
and like you can be so educated, you can take all the right steps as a parent, and you just still don't know.
right, and Harrison, I've been doing this for 3 decades now. And one of the things I drill home, I try to, with every audience, with every parent, is to say the internet is a complete open space,
Hmm.
right? It has all of the good to offer and all of the bad, and then the criminality, and you've got the porn industry, the child pornography industry, child sex abuse material, traffickers, predators, and it's all out there. And out of the box, these devices are open, and it's
Yeah.
up to the parent to manage those devices so that your kid can enjoy the benefits
Yeah.
and stay away from the harm and the dangers. And but I always say no child is immune. There's just no
No.
child is immune, because you've got dangerous people, dangerous content, multi-billion-dollar industries that are coming at innocent kids all the time. Now, up until the point where your parents found out, and I'm sure there were a lot of management tools that started to get put into place at that time.
Yeah.
But had they done anything? Had they tried to turn on filters or set your privacy controls or say, if you don't know somebody in the physical world, you can't play games with them online? Had they had any of those conversations with you?
I think for my family, we were really pioneers for what this meant to get groomed online.
Okay,
So the SRO officer talked about digital footprint and all this stuff, but we didn't really think like, oh yeah, there's going to be a creep in online that your kid's going to meet. Like this felt like an anonymous space.
right.
Um, we had some conversations, like, yeah, don't go to the white van. Be careful when you come home from school. um, you know, don't sext anybody. Like we had this conversation, like, hey, don't send pictures of yourself to girls at school. Like, fair,
Hmm.
thanks, mom. And we had the sex talk pretty early.
Yeah,
Um, and I thank my parents for that, because it gave me a lot of context. But
good.
we didn't really have any conversations because I don't think anyone, I don't think anyone felt the outcomes of all of the negativity from that. Like
Right.
there was no resources available.
Wow.
Those didn't exist yet.
Hmm. Well, Harrison, now here we are. Fast forward. You're how old?
21.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're 21. This started when you're 12. Okay, so tell us about your healing journey, because there's a turnaround and you've got a really great story. And I want our audience to hear how everything started to turn around. What was your low point? Um,
Yeah.
you had a dream. Tell us, get us now from then to now.
Yeah, Donna. It was really hard, especially when my parents, they took the Xbox, they took the phone, they took a lot of my privacy away, and I didn't feel like I could be myself. I was struggling to make friends still. I had spoken to a couple people at school about what had happened, and the story got misconstrued, and the bullying got
Hmm.
even worse.
Yeah.
Um, I just I didn't want to continue anymore. I felt like my family misunderstood everything, and my community did too, and my classmates. And I was like, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm not sleeping. I'm underweight. I feel ugly. I feel short. I'm covered in acne. I'm not getting good grades. Like, what's the point anymore? Um, so it came to a point where I started, writing out my thoughts, and I wrote a poem for my parents and just was like, hey, I love you. Um, but like, I can't do this anymore. Um, Especially after I thought I sent my best friend to prison,
Mm.
and this is where I was. So, uh, that low point was the suicide plan, really.
Mhm. So you wrote a poem. You were thinking about taking your own life.
Yeah.
Things didn't get any better there. Yeah, now your drug of choice, if you will, your computer, your gaming, and the
Yeah.
pornography and everything else is gone.
Yeah.
Um, Nobody's understanding what's happened and processing with you. And it doesn't sound like you had a counselor or anybody to help
No,
you in
not
that.
yet.
Okay, so what happened next?
Yeah. I don't come from a spiritual background at all. I'm the only spiritual person in my family. So this was kind of a really big eye opener for me, as the stark atheist in my my school. That was me. I The night that I had planned to take my life, I had planned to do it. I had seen it on TV. A girl, she like slit her wrists in a bathtub, and I was like, well, I can do that. That doesn't look that bad. Um, and I was afraid, but I knew this is what was probably going to happen. And right up until the point, it's after midnight, 1 or 2 in the morning. Um, I'm just so anxious. Like I'm like, I don't want to do it. Like I don't know what's going to happen to me. Like I had all this like existential fear. And so for the first time in my whole life, I decided like, what if I just prayed about it? Like, that was like, whoa, like that's not me at all. And
Right.
so, I prayed and I was like, hey, universe, if you see me, if you hear me, if you care about me, if you made me, or if you didn't, and if I have a purpose, like, please show me. Like, I don't want to leave my family behind. Like, I don't want to leave my, like, the few friends that I did have, like, I didn't want to leave them back behind. Like, I didn't have hope that things would get better, but um, I shot that signal flare, and for the first night in multiple weeks, I fell asleep with ease, and I had a vision and a dream. Absolutely changed my life.
So, do you want to share what
Yeah.
your vision was? Okay.
Yeah. Can I?
Yeah, I would love for you to.
Yeah. So I'm in this giant white room, and it's endless. It's just into the void, but it's beautiful and it's quiet. And I see this huge picture on the wall, landscape painting. Um, and it's this huge gradient. It's like this dark maroon, brown, like just deep blood red color. And it takes up so much of the page. And there's this little dot right in the corner with this beige white strip that goes up the side. And I'm like split between the two. Um, but the light is so faint.
Hmm.
It was so faint. And I'm looking at this painting and I'm like, what is happening? Like, what does this mean? And then I hear this like gentle, it was something between a booming, like, authoritative voice, but like also a gentle whisper. It was like
Mm,
you couldn't even define it. And it called me his son. He said, my son, you have planted your seeds in the wrong gardens,
mm,
and it's time to wake up. And so I woke up and I'm like shaking, I'm crying, I'm like angry, but I'm happy. And I didn't know how to process what I was feeling. Like I'm on the end of my bed and I'm like freaking out. I'm like, do I do it? Like, do I still like this changes everything. Like this changes absolutely everything. It was crazy.
So it did change everything. You didn't take your
Yeah.
life.
No.
And then who tell us what happened from there? You felt like the universe was really who was
Yeah.
talking to you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had some trouble with the Christians at school. We got into a lot of arguments
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. But I talked to a couple of them and I told them about what had happened. And they were like, yeah, no way, like you're joking, you're trying to bait us into an argument or whatever. And I'm like, no, seriously, like I was gonna take my life last night and like something's different. Like something has changed. And they're like, whoa, okay. Um, we have this small group if you want to come. And I'm like, I want to discover who this voice was.
Right.
And so I go to the small group, and it's a co-ed group. There's guys and girls there all through high school. Um, I was in seventh, eighth grade, and so they let me come, and um, this guy starts talking, and he starts just randomly opening up. He says like, "Hey guys, my name is," insert his name, "and I am a porn addict. I watch porn all the time, and I'm really dissatisfied with my life. I, miss my dad. Hear all these things that are going on in my life right now. Um, and like I just want you guys to like help me. Like I need people in my life to support me on my journey."
Mm.
And I had never heard anybody be that vulnerable before.
Right.
And some people were reacting poorly. Some people were like, "Oh, okay, that's kind of weird," and some people were like, "Yeah, that's real." And so like I don't even really know this guy, but I go and I talk to him, and I'm like, "Hey, I think that's me too. Like, can we have a conversation?" So I think that's really where everything began.
Right. So you start to come out about your own struggle with pornography.
Yeah,
You've had you've had a vision that you later learn was God,
yeah,
the Lord, right?
yeah, yeah,
And he heard your cry,
yeah,
right? And so now you end up I remember you telling me you got involved where you're actually doing some counseling at some point in an
yeah,
online group with the
yeah,
pornography stuff, and you're
yeah,
growing, you start growing in your Christian faith, and you
yeah,
did become a believer, right? A
yep,
follower of Jesus. And so
yeah,
take us now from, the process of healing,
yeah.
where you are now, and what would you say to other kids who are right now stuck where you were stuck before your healing began? So, but I want to hear a little bit more about your healing journey
Hmm.
and where you are now, and then your advice to kids, and then we're going to take a quick break.
Yeah, that sounds great. We, me and this guy at the small group, we were part of a community called Restoration Church, and in the Richmond area, we had a really big youth program at the time, and so him and a couple other guys had opened up about how they were feeling as well with their relationship to pornography and internet porn and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So we created a group, and it was on a app called Brain Buddy. Um, and it was actually the first time my parents ever found out that I was consuming porn, because like it was a paid for service, but I didn't have a job at the time. I was like 14, 15 years old, probably 15. And I'm on this recovery app. It's like $15 a month. So I stole my dad's credit card. And he sees like a couple months later, he's like, I see that you're like buying porn with my credit card. He's like, "You're done." And then I was like, "No, like I can explain."
Right.
Um, and so I didn't think my parents expected me to be like, "Actually, I have a really bad dependency on pornography." And so I joined this church small group, and we're like helping each other heal. We're like looking at each other's streaks and how well we're doing and encouraging each
Hmm.
other. Um, and so we were in that group for a long time, and some of the guys started to graduate high school, and I moved into high school, and I'm like a freshman and then a junior, or a freshman then a sophomore. And so um, I'm like 16 at this point, and most of those guys have moved away. They were really healing. So I joined this program on Discord, this little website called Discord. It was an anonymous site, where you talk to people about what you were going through or join communities.
Hmm.
And so I helped to found one group called the PMO Recovery Server, and we had Thursday night like anonymous calls, men and women, everybody, um, no cameras, just voices. Every Thursday night at 8 o'clock, we would all get together and we would just talk about it. Like, this is
Hmm.
what we're going through. Men with wives, women with husbands, boys with girlfriends, 16-year-old kids. And I was really on this healing journey, and I felt like, I had been so exposed at such a young age,
Yeah.
such a high capacity. Like the level of healing that I had experienced was exponential. And I just had to share that light with people. Um, it was a secular space, and we saw so much diversity of healing, so much.
That's amazing, isn't it? Because, when you've been exposed to this kind of content, and just for those who don't know how bad it is, it's not the old soft core stuff
Yeah.
from 30, 40 years ago that I was exposed to when I was a little girl. This is hardcore stuff. A lot of it
Yeah.
depicts violence against girls and women. It's very graphic, very violent, very I mean, it's this is the X of the X of the X, right,
Yeah. Yeah. This
Harrison?
is not intimacy.
No, no, it
Yeah.
has no. And so, gosh, to get from that to a place of healing and wholeness, I imagine, it's still a journey,
Oh
right?
yeah.
But to
Oh yeah.
have that accountability and to have those places to say, I'm not alone, it's not just
Hmm.
me, that's a big part of the healing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You need to be vulnerable. I think
Mm-hmm.
I I gave a little speech a while ago. I was in Colombia. We were doing a trip, a missions trip, and we were building some things for they have like a facility for single moms, and so we were helping build the facility. Most of them are migrants, and we were talking about vulnerability, and a lot of people were having a hard time with being vulnerable with what they were going through. It's part of the culture. Uh, the men were not sharing how they were feeling, and so I gave this little talk, and just thinking about the beautiful things that grow outside in the light, and comparing that to like the just disgusting things that grow inside of your house in the dark, black mold, mildew, fungus, like all these things that just make us so chronically sick. I think it's a great word picture for what happens inside of us when we're not able to share our lived experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, and that's great. And thank you for sharing that. And of course, what's going on in your mind and your soul and everything when you're exposed to such darkness and evil, right? And then you get drawn into that, whether it's through a grooming situation, which is where you're started, and then the world of online porn, very, very hard addictions to break. Because once you stop looking and consuming online, you still have those images that have now imprinted there that you can call up at will. And a lot of that, at least from what I've learned, is about retraining your brain, reprogramming your brain to be thinking on things that are lovely and beautiful and what's God's real intention for sexuality and everything.
Yeah.
But how did your relationship with technology change? I remember you saying that
Hmm.
you took a time out.
Yeah. Yeah, I did.
Tell us about that.
I did the dumb phone thing for a year and a half when I went to college, as we are going to talk about, and it was a really healing journey for me. I didn't wake up with the endless news and endless reels and TikToks and 1 million emails every day. I woke up with an alarm clock and I started my day. I had given myself the opportunity to take charge over my own life, over my own mind, and over my human experience. Um, and I think it really started when I began questioning with my iPhone, who's in charge in this
Hmm.
relationship? Who really holds the power? Yeah,
Right.
it was a life altering year and a half for me.
So it's like, is the tail wagging the dog or the dog wagging the tail? And when the technology starts to rule you, you go, oops, time
Yeah,
for a digital detox, right?
yeah, yeah. I wanted this to be a long-term thing. I learned a lot on the way. I I experienced a lot of judgment from other people when I pulled out my cell phone to exchange contact information. People would be like, "What in the world is that?" Some people would be really interested, and they're like, "Wait, like there's a better way." And some people
Mm.
would say, "Oh, that's your phone," you know. So it was a mixed bag of experiences. But yeah, it's really important that you take charge over your own digital choices.
But there are also other phones like the Gab phone. I mean, there are
Hmm.
phones that parents can get their kids so that
Yeah.
they can be in touch with each other, which is
Hmm.
important, right? But they're not connected to the internet. And that's where the
Hmm.
danger comes in. It's
Yeah.
like you can have a computer, if it's not connected to the internet, then great.
Yeah.
You still have to be careful with screen time because there is such thing as screen time addiction and everything
Hmm.
else. Now, You have coined a term that I just love. It's called digital intentionalism. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, what is that?
Yeah, so my journey on the dumb phone really inspired me to journal about my own experience. And I was recently in my kitchen listening to a podcast, and I was really, really, really sick of it. I was like, like it was a good podcast. It was about spiritual formation, the practice of solitude. And I'm like, wow, this is really great. And I felt like a hypocrite because I'm like filling my head with noise. So I take the headphones out, I put them on the counter, and I just start to listen. And I was like, God, like I'm right here. I'm just gonna cook my I don't remember if it was breakfast or lunch or whatever, but I was cooking and I was like, I'm right here. And I heard his voice again for the first time since I was, a young teen. And he said, for the moments between moments.
Hmm.
And for a while I didn't know what that meant. I was like, what does that mean? And then I had all of this like resurgence of all these journal entries and all the ways that I was feeling and all of the little changes in my life that I experienced on the dumb phone. In what was the busiest season of my life, through college and through my social work program. And I realized I think I ought to write a book about this.
Hmm. I think you should. And you're going to
Yeah.
call it
The moments between moments,
The
a journey
Moments
towards
Between.
digital intentionalism. That's my subheading. The journey towards digital intentionalism and making space for what matters most.
Oh, I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Well, I encourage you in that. I think that is
Yeah.
a book that young people and old people
Yeah.
like me could all benefit from, Harrison. And I am just delighted to have you on and to see what you're doing and to see how your journey with the Lord has helped you get from a place of utter desperation to where you were suicidal to now this place where you're studying, you're in school, you want to get a master's degree
Yeah.
in clinical social work, right, or counseling,
Yeah. Yep.
and writing a story about your book and doing shows like this. I mean, our little podcast, Internet Safety, but you've been on Good Morning America. I mean, you're really making your pain count, and that's part of the healing too,
Hmm.
isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, good.
Yeah.
Any other final word that you'd like to share?
Yeah. I think one of my favorite points from my book, it's still being authored right now, but reevaluate what the technology in your pocket is for. So we can look at the history of all of the machines inside of our lives, inside of our homes, the washing
Hmm.
machine, the blender, the refrigerator, the microwave. Um, and they all serve a purpose. They
Right.
serve a functional purpose that alleviates time in your life for you to do what matters most.
Right.
Um, and we come home from work and we load the dishwasher and we run it and we take it out so we can do the dishes and the laundry and make dinner in the microwave all at the same time.
Right.
Um, and it alleviates that time so you can spend time with the people that you love.
Right.
Um, but how ridiculous would it be if you sat in your bed after a really long day and you scrolled endlessly on your microwave, right? That's ridiculous. Who would
Right.
do that?
Right.
Our reality reflects that we spend all of our time on our devices, all of our free time. There is a serious crisis of people losing hobbies, people spending hours and hours on TikTok and Instagram Reels and endless news feed that just causes us so much anxiety.
Hmm.
And there truly is a better way.
There
Um,
is.
so when you ask someone what matters most to them, encourage them to pursue what matters most to them. Pick up a hobby.
Hmm.
You don't have to look at your phone endlessly. There's a space for it. But remember, it's meant to alleviate, not to consume you.
Hmm.
And I just encourage people as they evaluate what their phone is for. I really encourage people to create more than they consume.
We're going to talk over on the other side of the break. We're going to take a quick break right now. But when we come back, I want to talk about how you've used your pain to help others in your advocacy work now and what you're doing and what's the role of technology companies. What can they be doing better? How important is good legislation? And then we'll end up with some tips for kids and tips to parents. And so everyone will be back in 2 minutes with Harrison Haynes, and thank you for joining us. Hi, welcome back, everybody. And I'm here. We've been talking to Harrison Hayes, and he has told us his story from being groomed online to his healing journey and what he's doing now, and how he is making his pain and that trauma that he went through count. Now, Harrison, welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so let's talk about what these big tech companies need to be doing. All right, from your standpoint. At Enough is Enough, we focus a lot on corporate responsibility and accountability. We've been trying for years to get defaults turned on, so default filters turned on, parental controls working better and easier so that parents don't have to try to figure everything out right from the get-go, having reporting mechanisms clearer and easier. What do you think, as one who got trapped into this whole world of grooming in a game on a gaming platform, and then also in the world of pornography? Uh, what would you like to see? What would really help protect
Yeah.
kids?
Yeah. Yeah. I think what's really important is to kind of paint a word picture.
Okay.
So imagine you have sent your kid to go play at the local park, and they could be at any age 8 to 16. It doesn't really matter. We have these laws that protect youth from sexualized content, um, from all of this stuff, and the the online world doesn't reflect that. So
Mm-mm.
you have your kids at the playground, at the basketball court, wherever, and some creepy anonymous figure, you know, steps into the space and exposes your child to pornography, to self-harm, to advertisements for drugs that contain fentanyl. And you'd be livid. You'd be so frustrated. But the reality is that social media companies, they aren't held accountable for the same crimes that would happen in person. They're
Right.
not held liable for their own platforms and the content on them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we can look at COSA and we can talk about, censorship versus conduct. But I think what's really important is to know, like, in reality, like, these social media platforms, they're not held to the same standard. And
Right.
I think we really ought to question that rather than accepting that this is just the way that it is.
Right. And I totally agree with you. I mean, we've got laws on the books, for instance, um, that 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 are clear that this hardcore pornography that you started consuming as a kid are is not even protected speech for adults.
Yeah.
It's called obscenity under the law. Those laws haven't been enforced since George W. Bush was president. Yeah, I mean, it's a long time, right? I mean, it's a whole
Yeah.
generation or more of kids right there. We've got child sex abuse material, which we used to be called child pornography. Those laws are on the books, but law
Yeah.
enforcement can't even get that all shut down. There aren't enough
Hmm.
resources. So, and we want to see these tech companies be more accountable and actually do things voluntarily, but typically they don't, right? Until there's a lot of public pressure and shaming or legislation.
Yeah,
But do you,
absolutely.
but do you think that for instance, would it have helped your parents if they could have just gone and clicked a box, and when that Xbox turned on, the filters were there? You could only game with people that your parents allowed you to, and just making it easier for them and making it easier for you to be in a safe space. Would that have helped? Or do you see
Yeah,
something like that being helpful going forward?
I think absolutely. I think a lot of the frustration is that the parental controls right now
Hmm.
are on any device. I think especially iPhones are really challenging, because you're easily able to maneuver out of them.
Right.
Kids are wicked smart. Like, they they
Hmm.
know how to do these things.
And
So
they
I
can
think that,
learn. They can
yeah,
learn
you
online, right? You can say,
Google,
how do I
like,
disable my parental controls on this device,
yeah,
that platform?
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Make a new account or default the password or whatever. And it's really challenging. And I think that the fact that this responsibility has completely fallen onto parents is an injustice to
Hmm.
to children everywhere,
And it's an
especially in our
injustice to
nation.
parents,
Yeah,
Harrison.
because it's
I
a
mean,
lie.
yeah, well, it's a lie. And so you've got parents that don't recognize their kids are not immune.
Hmm.
It's hard for them to understand that there are really bad guys out there in multi-billion-dollar industries that want to hurt your kid, your
Yeah.
nice, innocent kid. And then they've got, say, one or two kids with two or three devices, and every parental control is different on every platform, every app,
Yeah.
every game, and it's just it's a nightmare for parents. In
Hmm.
fact, there was a story that came out. I know you know this, and I just want to hit this on Roblox because I've got two grandkids that use Roblox. And this report called Roblox a pedophile hellscape for kids. So, none of these platforms are safe. Where kids play, predators are preying. So, every parent out there, if your kid's got an internet connected device, gaming device, whatever it is, just recognize predators are going to be there searching for vulnerable kids, just like what happened to Harrison. So, Harrison, let's come to parents now. Parents are
Yeah.
the first line of defense, right? They have to be because law
Yeah.
enforcement, they don't necessarily have the resources, and some of these laws, like we said, aren't even being enforced. We've got laws now pending before Congress. We don't know where that's going to go yet, but everything really is falling on to parents. So what can parents do to create that safe space for kids
Mhm.
to be able to feel comfortable talking to them about hard things like, gosh, I got a problem with porn, or I'm talking to
Yeah.
this guy and he's sending me the stuff, and what do
Yeah.
what can parents do? Give them some advice.
Yeah. I think it starts all the way with what you live as a parent and what
Mm-hmm.
your reality is. So I think you could poll any American in a room and ask them what is the most important thing to them. Most of them would say their children or their family or their friends.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a few might say their career. Um, but how much of our time actually reflects this truth? We spend so much of our time on our own devices. We
Mm-hmm.
feel this deep sense of burnout, and we endlessly scroll, and our your children will see that, whether that's the Netflix marathon after work, or the TikTok or the Instagram or the whatever, and you're not making that intentional time
Right.
with your children. So I think creating intentional spaces for the phones and the screens to go away for a little while,
Mm-hmm.
and have structured or semi-structured time or spaces where you're having hard conversations. You're talking about sex, you're talking about pornography, you're talking about why work sucked that day with your
Mm-hmm.
children,
Mm-hmm.
and creating and setting the tone for for not perfect parenting, but real human parenting.
Right. And you think when parents see their parent, I mean, when kids see their parents being vulnerable, it probably does open up the space to where, gosh, they're not perfect either. They're struggling and I'm struggling. So when I'm stressed, maybe I don't need to go to the device. Maybe I don't need to
Mhm.
go and get drawn into the world of gaming or pornography or anything else.
Yeah.
And do you think, now this is the advice I give parents, but I want you to give me advice. I always say, um, try to let your kids know that nothing's off limits and
Hmm.
that no matter what they tell you, you're going to listen, you're not going to freak out as best you
Yeah.
can, and you're not going to shame them or blame them so that they can feel that you're safe and you're their safe person. Does that
Hmm.
work? Is that good advice?
I think that's great advice, especially if we're talking about grooming. Um, Children have been drawn away and have created safe spaces with strangers. So I think that that could potentially reflect the lack of authenticity in your relationship with your children, and that might not always be true, but it could be. So I think really being intentional that when you have a conversation with your children, that you're not reflecting that they're in trouble. You're not reflecting that they're doing something wrong. Um,
Right,
you're not reacting out of fear or anger when you potentially discover that these things are happening. But you say, I've noticed you spent a lot more time on the game recently, or you've been, you know, me and your father, whatever, noticed that you're consuming this content online. Like, do you want to tell us about that? Like, and even offering a space for you to be vulnerable and say, like, if this is something that was part of your life or is part of your life, like, yeah, actually, you consume this. And when I was a kid, like, I watched a lot of this content and this is what it did. Um, and so just meeting your kid in vulnerability without expecting them to pour out and explain themselves and not
right.
meeting them there, because that can be detrimental to your relationship.
Well, yeah, and you're absolutely right. And also this fear of taking the technology away. So that's another big one. They're like, oh, if I tell them this or that, they're going to take my phone, they're going to take my Xbox, they're going to take my whatever. And what I try to encourage parents to do is, I mean, if there is a serious situation and you first try to lock down the technology as best you
Mm,
can and put boundaries around the technology, get the
yeah,
filters, the privacy settings, and all those things turn on every single internet enabled device or platform. And if you can't be a good digital parent over each device and each platform, consider not letting your kids have those because
absolutely.
you really have to, right, manage that because it's anything goes out there. Now talk to Harrison, to the young person who is trapped. They're trapped in porn addiction. They're trapped in gaming addiction, which is a real addiction now, as you know.
Yeah.
And they're trapped and they don't know what to do. What advice would you give them?
There is a much richer life available. And that's going to be really easy for someone to say, who's just a everyday Joe. But like I experienced this. I was trapped in the cycle of pornography, self-harm, depression, anxiety. And when you consume all of this content and you allow it to form you, you rob the world of the wonderful gift of yourself.
Mm,
You rob the world of the wonderful gift of you.
mm,
Find community, whatever that looks like.
mm,
Find a group that you can be vulnerable with, a friend, um, a mentor figure, and just be real. Open up and be
right,
authentic and find safe spaces where you can really be yourself and you
right.
can come alive to who you are and who you're meant to be.
That's right. And that there is hope, right?
Yeah.
We've got, 30 seconds here. And so I think, Harrison, you and I both want to say to parents and to kids that there's hope. First
Oh
of
yeah.
all, a lot of these dangers and that we've been talking about are preventable. You can go to our website at internetsafety101.org. We've got free resources on the dangers of all these different areas that we've been talking about, and then how to prevent that from happening, and then where to go to get help. So, 5 seconds, Harrison. Final word. How can people find you online or connect with the organization you're working with?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn at Harrison Haynes, Haynes, and you can find me on Instagram at Harrison Owen Haynes. And if you'd like to collaborate, you can email me at harrison@wiredhuman.org.
wiredhuman.org, which is a great organization. So, everyone, that's wiredhuman.org. Harrison, thank you so much. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for fighting to make the internet a safer place now for children and for families and for sharing your story. You're a brave young man, and God bless you.
Yeah, thanks, Donna. Thanks for creating this space.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Internet Safety with Donna Rice Hughes, designed to educate, equip, and empower you to keep your children and family safe in the digital world. Until we talk again, have a beautiful and safe week.